It's a big year for Big Blue.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much.
Big year in Big Blue. Big year. What's going on, man? Happy Memorial Day to you.
Happy Memorial Day to you, Kyle Crabbs. Good to be with you here on this fine holiday.
Yeah, we hope everybody, especially some Giants fans, but hopefully everybody, carves a little time out of the holiday, or you're out on the grill or whatever, and talks a little shop here about the New York Football Giants as we get ready to go through the NFC East this week.
Yes, NFC East week is here. We've done some other divisions as well. AFC West last week as we work through the entire NFL over this stretch of time where we are evaluating the roster, studying these teams. We're going through and grading each player, putting them into different buckets. Our buckets are roster cornerstone, quality starter, rookie, sufficient starter, replacement level, quality depth, non-roster caliber, incomplete evaluation, and a practice squad developmental player. Every bucket has points assigned to it. Every position is weighted in terms of importance. And by the end of this thing, we are going to stack up all of these rosters, and we are showing our work, and we are having a conversation today about the New York Giants, which will be centered around the skill players, then the trenches, and then finally the back seven.
Yeah, so I have my my depth chart up here. I have not looked at anything that you have. So the first question I have is, were you willing to put Malik Nabers in the franchise cornerstone bucket off the jump? I did. I made the leap. I'm feet first in.
Well, last week I put Ladd McConkey in the franchise cornerstone bucket, so you knew that Malik Nabers had to be in there. I feel like that was a congruency check by you on me there.
No, and honestly, I did not do that accounting. I do like when we get to the end, though, and we do have it all, because all the names are color-coded, and we have each row as a team, and you can kind of look straight across. And you see everybody's wide receiver run and all the color codes, and like you do see what names end up in the same colors, and we do that final kind of cross-check before we finalize the roster power rankings grades. And there's been some funny times where like we maybe haven't done like a Ladd McConkey on a Thursday and then turn around and do Malik Nabers on a Monday and have that congruency in the back of your mind. And then we see how it is all stacked up. We're like, somebody's either got to come up or come down here. Like,
yeah, it's a good part of the process here.
Yes.
If this guy's in this bucket, then this guy has to be, right? So
yeah. So Nabers obviously had an electric first season for the Giants this past year. And it feels like the rest of it is kind of, there's a stabilizing presence with, you brought back Darius Slayton on a new contract. Felt like he was on the trade block for 2 years. You can get a new contract done with him. You got some young guys in the tight end room with varying skill sets. You got Theo Johnson. Obviously, they betting big on the traits there. He's an incomplete evaluation. We don't really know what he is just yet. But I like the bet that they're placing with bringing in Greg Dulcich to compete for a roster spot as potential a bridge between Theo Johnson's receiving profile and Daniel Bellinger's blocking profile. And like Dulcich, if he could ever stay healthy and get the hamstring figured out, would be a really nice piece to kind of go with that. So I feel like they've got a lot of opportunity in the tight end room. Obviously, they drafted Thomas Fidone, who you and I both liked out of Nebraska. So he had some medical questions, but they have last year's big hit as a 5th-round draft pick in Tyrone Tracy at running back to pair with Devin Singletary. I think that gives them a really nice floor for complementary skill sets of physicality, explosive play element. Obviously, Cam Scatterbo brought into the mix. We'll see what kind of share he can earn there. And then I feel like the rest of the wide receiver group is kind of a smattering of guys that ideally are depth players, but because you have the anchor in Nabers and Darius Slayton is the other kind of marquee guy, as long as the pecking order stays that way with health and durability, I kind of feel like they've got some pieces that can make the rest of it work.
330 combined targets in 2024 for Malik Nabers and Wan'Dale Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the least talked about stats from last year's season in the NFL was that Wan'Dale Robinson received 140 targets, 93 receptions for less than 700 yards, 699. But man,
that's a fun. Let me pull that.
Come on, guys.
Receiving heat map up. And pull that one up.
So, I mean, I'm sure a lot of that is just they were unsettled at quarterback, and there was a lot of forcing the ball to Nabers and Robinson. I'm interested in seeing how this offense takes on a new life with hopefully a little bit more in the way of depth with how they distribute the football. I think Theo Johnson entering this season kind of more established as the tight end. I think no matter who's playing quarterback, there's going to be more stability. I'm excited to see them distribute this football a little bit more equitably in this offense because I love Nabers. I like Robinson, but I think you could probably cut those Robinson targets in half and probably run a better offense.
Yeah. How many targets did you say Wan'Dale Robinson had?
130.
How many of them do you think came further than 10 air yards downfield?
Not many.
Give me a number. Just throw a number out there. Just give me a number.
10 or more yards on the field. I would say 30 of them, 30 of the 130.
You're too high. You're too high.
Oh, God.
It's 22.
22.
22 targets for 10 air yards downfield. If you go 6 or more air yards downfield, how many targets did he have this past season?
130.
How many of them do you think were
I'm sorry, it's 140. 140 targets. Okay. 140.
So how many of them do you think were beyond 5 yards down the field? We just said 22 were 10 or more air yards down the field.
50?
You're too high again. It's 45.
Jeez.
I mean, we had 95 targets within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage this year. Wan'Dale Robinson.
That's how you catch 90. This might be a new thing. This might be a new Peyton Barber thing. How do you have?
Oh yeah. What percentage of targets within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage?
Or something about like receptions and not having a certain yardage threshold. This guy had 93 catches for 699 yards. Has that ever happened? Like Troy Brown somewhere right now is thinking, man, I thought I had some crazy yards and average numbers, and this guy's coming out here with that is insane.
Right.
Anyways, this is a little bit of like Brian Daboll in Buffalo with the types of receivers, like not necessarily prioritizing size, right? In Buffalo, they actually called them the Smurfs. It was like Beasley, Brown, Diggs, Sanders, like
McKenzie.
Yeah, man, this is they want those quick separators for sure, which is an interesting contrast with some bigger dudes at tight end and Theo Johnson and even Daniel Bellinger. And I like the makeup of the running back room, man. If it comes together, Tyrone Tracy's like the explosive player. Singletary's the high floor, can pass pro. Scatabo is going to be a dangerous short yardage back. So I think it all works together. It's just about, getting the quarterback thing and kind of like, I think becoming a little bit more equitable on how you run your offense to share the ball a little bit more and diversify what you have going on, which I think will be rooted in the quarterback dynamics that'll exist this year.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of offenses you can look across the league, and I think this is a good example of one who it kind of became very apparent it goes back to that conversation we had on Thursday with the Chiefs and coaching and problem solving and what kind of resources do you give yourself to solve your problems on a week in and week out basis. And the Giants last year, they just had a very narrow scope of how to try to negotiate the problems that they had with their personnel. And obviously nobody goes into a season with the expectation that this is how we're going to play the game, right? But when your hands are tied, your hands are tied. And that's what the Giants found themselves in last year. And we mentioned some of those complementary skill sets, but Jalen Hyatt is a big body down the field type of guy to potentially win and play outside. And Wan'Dale and Malik is kind of twitchy slot or separator type guys like you mentioned. Lil Jordan Humphrey, I think, could be an interesting, big role last year in Denver, right?
He always does with Sean Payton, right?
Right. Yeah. But a big bodied slot type of guy, like, there's a run game profile there for a Daboll team that loves to run 11, right? Like the team lives in 11. So having when you want to try to have a little bit more of a threat to be physical and run the ball, like I like the DNA here, but like you said, it's tying it all together with the quarterback position is gonna, I don't want to say make or break the offense, but I have concerns about the guy that they have penciled in to be the starter to open the year and his ability to do the things necessary to run the offense.
Draft Dudes Do Math strikes again. It's 310 combined targets for Nabers and Robinson. 170 for Nabers, 140 for Robinson. So for all those yelling at me, here's your moment. Thank you for getting the YouTube comments in, though I'm sure you've already fired those off. 310 career combined targets last year for Nabers and Robinson. All right, there will be no math involved talking trenches, O-line, D-line. Hopefully not. We'll do that here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with us. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just another budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. The insights are surprising. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and I save more. Plus, it's super convenient. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can just use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan for your long-term goals. And it's easy to collaborate. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever, so you can track your shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
Some quick math here.
Oh, gosh. Right off the bat.
The Giants averaged 5.1 net yards per attempt last year. This is building off the Wan'Dale Robinson stat that you just totally commandeered the first segment of it. Where did that rank amongst NFL teams?
Oh, 5.1 net yards per attempt.
5.1 net yards per attempt.
I'm guessing that's pretty low. I'd say that's probably bottom 5.
It is bottom 5. If you told me it was 5.1, I would have guessed that would have been dead last, right? It is not. It ranked 30th. It ranked 30th.
Who was worse?
Do you have any guesses?
And net yards per attempt last year?
Yes.
Oh, man. I think about the Saints, but they had like a vertical component to what was going on there.
I remember they came out gangbusters in the first month of the season. They lit it up.
Boy, the Bears might be up there
with all those sacks taken.
Tennessee official guess, Tennessee.
Okay, so Tennessee was not the team that I had up. Tennessee had 5.7 net yards per attempt.
Wow.
That's more than a half yard higher.
Wow, edging them out. The Patriots?
No. You sure you want to?
I don't know. It's the Browns. It's got to be the Browns.
Okay, the Cleveland Browns.
Browns and Raiders.
The Cleveland Browns had a net yards per attempt last year of 4.8.
Okay. Boy, that's tough. There's teams that ran the ball better than that, I'm sure. Boy, that's terrible.
And then who you said Raiders?
Yeah.
Incorrect. There was only one other team below 5. You've said them already.
I just didn't say it was an official guess.
Yeah.
You try to talk.
Took a lot of sacks. A lot of sacks.
Oh,
think Tennessee. A lot of sacks.
Tennessee.
No, we already established
more sacks than Tennessee.
First overall pick last year. 68 sacks.
The Bears. The Bears. That's a good call.
68 sacks. Caleb Williams lost 466 yards on sack last year.
Absolutely kill you.
So they averaged 4.9 net yards per attempt.
All right, so you're not.
That's the company the Giants keep is the Bears and the Cleveland Browns on a net yards per attempt last year.
Well, the good thing for the Giants is they have a different quarterback room, which I can't exactly say is true for those other teams.
Right. And one thing about Russell Wilson, Not going to have negative plays because he's just going to get the ball down to the running backs.
You don't have to worry about that, Giants fans. He will not throw the ball
to the other team.
The best he can.
So some of that will depend on protection. And if the protection's good enough, we may see Jackson Dart soon before long.
Yeah.
So I have it graded as such. Andrew Thomas obviously has some injury stuff as of late, but roster cornerstone when he's healthy. I have John Runyon as a sufficient level starter at guard. I still have an incomplete evaluation on John Michael Schmitz. If I'm being honest, I'm probably being tainted a little bit by my pre-draft bias where I really liked John Michael Schmitz. I kind of still have hopes that he'll become a better player than what he's been thus far. I thought Greg Van Roten took a step back this year versus
he's 35. You forget how old this
35.
guy is, man.
Yeah, he was really good with the Raiders in 2023, and I did not think he was the same player with New York. I have him down as a quality depth player in a perfect world. And then Jermaine Illuminor I have as a sufficient level starter at right tackle.
I see it pretty similarly. I need Andrew Thomas to be healthy here.
Please.
And I need John Michael Schmitz to take that year 3 step, which I think, some more stability with the offense and what's around him. He can do that. I think he's a skilled player, and I love the pick at the time. I agree on Van Roten. I think there's been a little age on him, but I mean, really, it's an unbelievable career for a guy that's never been like highly thought of. I respect the career that he's had. And Illuminor, man, just took a little time, but he's been able to be a stabilizing player at right tackle. They've had to use a lot of depth, and they paid James Hudson good money to come over and be the swing tackle. Aaron Stinney, another established player in the league that gives them depth. These guys have had to been used. Josh Ezeudu had to be used late in the season. Evan Neal, even though you kind of fall off, he had to play later in the season. And so, I think the Giants would greatly benefit from health with their offensive line. But when I think about where the ceiling of this unit goes, it's tied to Andrew Thomas's health. It's development from John Michael Schmitz, and then the drafting of Marcus Mbow, where you feel like there's probably a future starting spot for him on this offensive line. So I like that we have some floor, but there's a little bit more ceiling with this group than I've thought there's been in recent years.
Yeah, and Evan Neal converting to guard. Really interested to see what that looks like. I think, and if he could beat out Van Roten for the starting right guard spot, I don't think it will happen. But if it would, I mean, there's a couple of guys that have recent track records of kicking inside, and Mekhi Becton did it last year in Philadelphia. With the Giants, this was the Eric Flowers pathway to a sustainable NFL career, right? As guys that have that kind of length, have that kind of size, have that kind of physicality. The potential for Neal, and I think the right guard spot should be considered wide open, and Van Roten played 1,125 snaps last year. He played 100% of the snaps. But as we've talked about, I mean, older player, he just turned 35 at the end of February, but he's not he's a technical player. He's not a super physical player, right? Because he doesn't have like the kind of size that when you think about Thomas, when you think about Illuminor, when you think about what Evan Neal could be. Like, I think that there's a chance there. I wish this would have been done sooner, but the fact that it's done now, like, we'll take that as the win in the final year of his rookie contract, and hopefully he can make something of it, because I think it's the big X factor for the Giants and their offensive line.
Well, and Greg Van Roten is a 3-spot player, right, on the interior, which that's part of why you can be 35 years old, still be rostered, right? Like, so the point being with Van Roten is, while I think you could think of him as a starter, I think it's a good call out that, like, there's pathways where he provides a lot of value to this team in a reserve role, and you can maybe get some playing time for a younger guy.
Which I think the last time he was in a reserve role was in Buffalo, right?
Yeah. In
22. He's a starter the last 2 years for the Raiders and Giants. But you want to set the table for the defensive line here? I know we got to get a break. Maybe we could squeeze another minute out and before we go to break.
Yeah, we can start setting the table here for this defensive line, which is, I think anybody would tell you, is the strength of this roster, where you have Dexter Lawrence, who probably has an argument to be the best interior defensive lineman in the game. Super dynamic player that, I mean, obvious franchise cornerstone, affects the run and the pass. He's one of those special nose tackles. And you and I can always hang our hat on that evaluation. The world was kind of sour on him coming out of Clemson, but boy, I know you and I were both high. I think Roy Robertson Harrison is a nice, like, stabilizing player next to him. I'm not sleeping on that addition. You have the drafting of Darius Alexander with Raheem Nunez-Roches. I think that's a pretty good 4 deep on the interior, depending on how Alexander plays as a rookie. And then, boy, you got an embarrassment of riches on the edge with Kayvon Thibodeaux, Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, who, super supremely talented high pick from this year. Not to mention Chauncey Golston, who gave a few bucks to come over and can kind of play a hybrid role for them for this Shane Bowen defense. So we will explore that a little bit deeper and talk about the rest of this defense here on the other side of it. So folks, be sure to stick with us.
I think that Golston ad can be a sneaky good one.
Absolutely. Yeah. Multiple front like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as, you can go odd front and go Dexter, Robertson, Harris, and Golston as the 3 down, and then you're still getting 2 out of 3 of Burns, Carter, and Thibodeaux on the field at the same time.
Yeah, it's good.
And then you obviously have the opportunity. You get into your long and late downs, and you're going to have Carter and Burns and Thibodeaux and Dexter Lawrence on the field at the same time.
Problems.
There's matchup problems.
Yeah, there's problems there.
So I love what they did, and I love adding Darius Alexander. I don't know what kind of size of the pie is going to be there for him this year. In a perfect world, man, he really runs with it, because I think he's got great complementary skill set, and I think he's behind a couple of guys who he can learn some things for as well to kind of set him up for success long term. But you talking about the multiple front, Darius can do some of the same stuff Chauncey Golston could do. I think he's physically capable of doing it.
That was fun. Like, I want to get too crazy here, but when you watch Darius Alexander at Toledo from a alignment perspective, and even at times an impact perspective, like, he's got some Chris Jones vibes, like just the way he was used. Like, chill out, everybody. But
you're not the first name to invoke that name, and people have invoked it a lot more irresponsibly than that when talking about Darius Alexander.
You don't see guys like that playing at a 5, and rushing off the edge. Like, but I think there's a ton of versatility there. And this team, dude, you talk about a team that's been stressed with O-line depth. Their D-line depth has been stressed as well. I mean, they had a lot of guys taking a lot of snaps, like Jordan Riley, Elijah Chapman, Casey Rogers, who wasn't even a starter in college, as a UDFA, has to come in and play minutes for them late in the season. Like, this is another group that was really strained for health. And like, that has to be such an important part of their pathway this year, is being healthy in these trenches so they can have some continuity and build, as opposed to just trying to plug in players every week to get by.
Can you tell me which defensive lineman on the Giants roster last year played more than 600 snaps for the year?
It might have been Nacho.
Nacho was 1 at 6'10". There's one more. Played on the outside.
Was it Tomon Fox?
It was Burns.
Oh, Burns.
Yeah.
All right.
So
I was
Burns 866. Nunez-Roches 6'10", and then you're at Thibodeaux 594, Dexter Lawrence 552, Elijah Chapman 423, DJ Davidson 262 is kind of the distribution for the defensive front. So you talk about the edge or the depth, and I think names like Chauncey Golston and Darius Alexander and even Victor Dimukeje are huge names to invoke here if they have to go through something similar this year.
Yeah. I think they're better equipped for it, but hopefully they don't have to do it.
Yes. Well, don't want to see those guys playing Elijah Chapman snaps. But,
no, but that's the point, man.
But if they do, it's better than Elijah Chapman. So
Right.
Back 7. This group had a lot of work done on it with a couple of marquee free agent signings. Javon Holland coming over from Miami, Paulson Adebo coming over from New Orleans. To go with Tyler Newman, who is I'm willing to classify Newman as a successful draft pick from last year already.
Absolutely.
Deontae Banks is a former first-round pick. Drew Phillips, I think you could classify as a successful draft pick for the Giants thus far. It looks really promising.
Yeah.
You got linebackers and Bobby Okereke, who they paid handsomely last year in free agency. Micah McFadden. Now, I think the depth almost everywhere concerns me in the back seven, where you have Cordell Flott. I like Corey Black as a rookie out of Oklahoma State this year that they got on day 3. Dane Belton is a pretty sturdy player, but the off-ball linebacker and the outside corner spots, I think depth, this is where health is going to be really important for this defense to maximize their potential.
This Darius Musso guy got some run late in the season, which helps a little with their depth. But I mean, even Chris Board's a special teams player. They one thing that stood out to me in looking at some of the additions they made with Chris Board and Zach Pascal is they want to get better on special teams, and those are 2 players that can certainly help there. But I think that's fair to call out the depth defensively, and even Paulson Adebo coming in off of injury, right? I think highly of the signing, but you want him to be healthy, and boy, he was on such a good pace over the last year and a half in New Orleans. I think that could be a really critical signing because we need Deontae Banks in year 3 to realize his potential. I think that's kind of the X factor for this defense, and certainly with the front that they've established, that's going to help the rush to complement the coverage. And we could see Deontae Banks, who came in, if I'm not mistaken, was a little underexperienced out of Maryland, but physical traits, the press skills were the appeal. And so I'm really intrigued to see how he takes a step this year, and then how Javon Holland comes in and impacts this defense. Early career Javon Holland was a player that I love, man. I thought that everything that he did, like even the punt return stuff, his energy on the field, the tackling, like you felt like this was a star in the making. But the last couple of years in Miami weren't nearly as good. They had some coordinator changes, which probably didn't help. But we know what Javon Holland can do because we've seen him at his best, and it's really good. We need him to find that here in year 1 with the Giants.
Yeah, I think the big mystery for that is Javon has been very hyper-focused on getting the second contract. So now that that's been achieved, one of 2 things is going to happen. Either it's going to alleviate all the pressure that he's been putting himself under, and he'll play better, or you were so focused on the objective that now that you've got it, what do you do with it? So it's a storyline for New York, who obviously, I don't think he got the market he was hoping or expecting that he was going to get either. He signed for, I believe it was 15.
Yeah.
And this was somebody who had some intent on resetting the safety market. And from an annual average salary perspective, this contract already ranks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9th. And that was, he needed to get 0.1 million more than Cam Bynum, who signed him for agency this same year as well, to get above 10th. So if he's the best version of himself, I think it can be a game-changing play for the back end for the Giants. But we haven't seen it since he sprained both MCLs on Black Friday against the Jets in 2023. It's really the last time I saw Javon Holland play like you mentioned, early career stage Javon Holland.
Well, maybe that's a win for the Giants where they can get value out of that deal that maybe 2 years ago you're surprised where it landed because we've seen him play good ball. What do you think about Micah McFadden? I feel like kind of a role-specific player, but as a late-round pick, or he was like a 5th-round pick, I feel like he's been okay. Maybe you wish he was a little bit more established for some of the depth concerns, but there's times where I watch Micah McFadden, I feel like he can go a little bit.
Yeah, I think when you go back to what he was at Indiana too, is just really good pressure player. He's got a good sense of providing third down value and being a gap shooter. And I think that plus sufficient level range playing behind the defensive front that's in front of him. Like, I think it's a really good embodiment of positional value, and sometimes why teams don't prioritize stack backer super high, because if you have the right pieces around it, he's played over 1,400 snaps the last 2 years. He started 28 games.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can do a lot worse. I think he does give you some of that pressure value to his game. I think the thing that he really would benefit from cleaning up is some of the missed tackles, but that kind of gets into some of the limitations for Micah. If I remember, and I'm pulling it up now, I don't believe he has great length, which is one of those ones that, you kind of have to, it's 11th percentile wingspan.
Well, Bobby Okereke has all the length.
Right. But that's why Bobby Okereke gets paid and gets drafted high. And Micah's like, hey, he's a really good football player, but he doesn't have great length. And there's some tackling stuff there. So I think you take the good and the bad. Ivan has a sufficient level starter. And I think he can continue to be an impactful player because of who's playing in front of him and how he's protected as a result.
Interesting year ahead for the Giants. Obviously, the quarterback piece of this conversation will decide everything in terms of what they get early from Russ Wilson, what the transition looks like to Jackson Dart, because one thing we know about the NFL is that first-round quarterbacks play. It's just a matter of when. And then they have a very difficult schedule particularly early on, for a team where I know there's a lot of optimism for Giants fans, and you should be optimistic. I think this roster is probably as good as I've seen it yet under Shane and Daboll. And there's a lot of heat on them, but I think collectively, most people look at this as a make or break year for the Giants, which again, we said last year and they survived. And so navigating this season, figuring out like, what does success look like? Is it the playoffs? Is this a team that realistically can get there based on the journey ahead, based on what needs to happen at quarterback? I'm interested to see how it plays out. Obviously, this division looks pretty good. There's a lot of hype right now for Dallas. You had the NFC Championship game was played between two teams in this division, right? So I think it's foiling together the reality of what the Giants, like where they are in their build versus what's ahead of them and how you equate that to success. I think could be a difficult formula to figure out, which, I'm not good at math. So we'll see how it comes together for the Giants in a big year for Big Blue.
Yeah, I think it's hard because I think successes and failures here aren't necessarily defined by what everybody wants successes and failures to be defined as a very binary black and white wins and losses type of thing in what's year 4 of the regime, right? It's just the timeline of how the thing has gone about being built, and you overachieved early, and then that kind of, we got, maybe our eyes got a little bit too big for our stomach as far as that year 2 decision-making process with bringing in what they traded the 100th overall pick for Darren Waller, how that experience go,
and paid Daniel Jones, right?
Paid Daniel Jones, and by paying Daniel Jones, you heard the psychology of Joe Shane talking about, well, we're not paying Daniel Jones, but we're paying Daniel Jones to pay Saquon Barkley and turn around and hand him the football, right? And I think the hard part of that is Tyrone Tracy in a vacuum. You look at the decision-making process and resource allocation,
right?
And you can make an argument to say, well, they got great contributions from Tyrone Tracy versus paying Saquon Barkley a $20 million a year contract. But when you go 3-14, that's what you get. So very interesting year for the Giants ahead, for sure. But that's going to do it for us here today on the show. Kyle Crabbs, Joe Marino, we appreciate you guys as always for checking out Locked On NFL Scouting. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And we will be back again tomorrow to look at formerly America's team, Dallas Cowboys.